the ICE car, it had an easier battle. It was replacing what? The horse. Right. Now you're jumping from a car that is comfortable, works, fast, fun, efficient, cheap, and you're jumping to another car that is just driven by something else. Often nowadays, science, it looks like religion. You know, it's like, this is true. There is no debate about it. Yeah. And you try to have a dialogue. You're the demon. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not crazy. I just want to ask a question. When has it become bad to ask a question? I was in politics. I was in the government, as I told you. And at some point, you see like there's no way out. It's like everybody thinks they know the answer, but nobody really knows anything. We're constantly like in this state of, I don't know, abstractness, and we can't fix it. And I remember I first started working in a car. Oh, it's a nut, there's a bolt, you tighten it, it's tight, I'm done.
Salutare tuturor! Urmăriți We the People, un podcast 1776. Invitatul episodului de astăzi este gazda canalului de YouTube Driving for Answers. Vă invităm la o conversație fascinantă despre motoarele cu combustie internă și mașinile electrice, istoria automobilelor, tehnologie și politici publice. Bine ați venit la We the People!
Good morning, D4A, Drive for Answers. Thank you for joining us on our very, very little channel, hopefully going to grow. Like I told you in our pre-talk, I'm really fascinated by your channel. I'm usually not, I'm not a car guy. I don't have a driver's license. I probably couldn't tell a carburetor from a clutch pedal. And that's why I'm fascinated by your channel, because it's not only you're explaining things in a very clear way, you're also doing it in a fun way, and you're also touching on a variety of subjects. So and for me, engineers are that, and people that know engineering are that type of special category that always amazes me. So again, thanks for coming in, and thanks for going to coming in on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to having a nice chat together.
Right. So, on your channel, you did cover and do cover extensively the matter of internal combustion engine cars versus electric cars. So what would be the motivation behind this? Is this just something that your audience requires or asks for, or is there another motivation that drives you to touch on this little car war that we're having the last decade or so?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, there's a couple of motivations. And obviously this is, it's sort of a big, you cannot deny it, it's a big deal right now that's going on. And I mean, the initial push for talking about it obviously comes a lot from the media, but of course it also comes from the actual concrete, tangible world of technology, where we now have electric cars that you can buy, own, drive, something that was not the case before. And then, as I said, from the media side, we have this push that is talking about the change, about the electricity is the future, we will have to go electric, and so on and so forth. So obviously we all, nowadays with the internet, we're all connected, and we all get to hear and know largely similar things. So there's this impetus to know something that always is going to happen. How is it going to impact me? How is it going to change my life? And we're all thinking about this. Most of us, many people drive to work, and not just drive to work. You own a car. For people like me, a car is a important part of your life in terms of hobby, in terms of a source of excitement and, engagement and enjoying things. It's a big deal. So when somebody says, when you hear these sentences, cars are going to, ICE cars are going to be banned, electricity is the future. So obviously you get a need to talk about it. And my primary motivation was to sort of, what I'm really tired of online, and something that I think is damaging overall, are these phrases that are created online, these one sentence things where somebody says electricity is the future, and that's it. Over. There's no, and so I try to create content which I hoped was objective, where I try to, give some sort of data, some sort of statistics, some sort of concerns, challenges that'll have to be tackled in the present as well as in the future. So that was sort of my motivation. It's really hard to put it into a simple answer.
Right.
So I wanted to dive deeper into the issue and see, what might be sort of a objective overview of it and what might be, try to make an educated guess of what might be happening. And obviously, after doing that, I realized that there is no simple answer to this. How electrifiable something is in terms of a country, a region, a continent, doesn't matter. There's like a million factors in terms of the customer base, the buyers, the people, the income, the geographies, the natural resources, where the electricity comes from, the governments in terms of import, export laws, you name it. There's a million things that play a part into whether electric cars, how suitable they're going to be for certain parts of the world, certain lifestyles, certain kinds of people. So,
right. Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned this because I sense there is a tinge of exasperation that we felt as well when we started our channel, both the Romanian channel and the English channel, where we realized there is this tendency of leaning on ideology and leaning on very simple pre-made phrases to counter your opponents and not going into the depth of issues and really analyzing issues and really discovering exactly the kind of variation that you're talking about. Because again, on our channel, we're mostly interested in policies, economics, that kind of stuff. And if you go back to Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist, he has this thing of human action, and he says that human action is very, very, very hard to predict. That there is so much variety in that it has to do with the historical context, the geographical context, the type of policy you have. Again, like you said, the type of energy that you might have available, and basically he says that it's insane to try to apply the same solution to everyone, to try and bring everyone to the same level, because there is simply too much variation. And I think this is the fascinating thing about humankind, especially this kind of variations, that we can learn from each other. We can try to see what solutions someone else found with their problems and try to see if we can adapt to our situation. But again, I sense the same sense of exasperation where people are so, especially since social media came around, people are so easily swayed into fighting, into taking sides, and most of the actual debate that would produce actual results just goes out the window. And it's sad because all these topics are fascinating. And for instance, I've been accused, if I drove, I would be a petrol head. So I've been accused of hating electric cars. And I said, look, I don't hate electric cars. I have nothing against the technology itself. In my opinion, all I'm saying is that the technology at this point is immature or not mature enough, and that forcing it through policies is not going to accelerate the rate at which it matures. So it has to take its time, as the internal combustion engine did. We're coming off of over 1 century of evolution in technology. So in most of these exchanges that I've been seeing on the internet as well, there is the matter of efficiency comes along very, very often. It's how efficient ICE cars are versus electric cars. So how do you think efficiency is best defined in the context of day-to-day usage of a car? And which type of car would you say is ultimately more efficient at this moment?
Yeah. Before I answer that, just to come back to what you said, I really found that interesting. Human action is very hard to predict. I love that. I mean, you go into a classroom, you have 30 kids, and it took us, 50 years to figure this out, that the same thing, you teach 30, just 30 humans, you teach the same thing, and some of them are going to excel at it, some of them are going to struggle, and then you change your teaching approach just a bit, and you have totally different results. And then nowadays you have in education talks about an individualized, and if you send your kid to a really expensive school. They're going to talk about this approach where it's tailored towards your child because everybody's different. And then imagine talking about an entire country, an entire, segment of population. When it comes to the online thing, that is, I'm starting to speak about that a bit more when I can. And this is really, that's the comment section, right, of social media. It was designed for dialogue, wasn't it? So that you and me and A, B, C, D persons, we can talk to each other and have dialogue. But instead, to me, it seems like the comment section is like killing dialogue. I say something about EVs, and I really try to be objective. And it's, of course, what you already predicted is, no, you're a petrolhead, you believe in fossil fuels, you're this. You get immediately labeled, and, just, it doesn't matter what you're saying. Nobody's even listening anymore because this is who you are, and you're going to be, they have labeled you, they have pigeonholed you, and dialogue is dead. But we also have to remember that, and I love this, somebody said this, I have no idea who, but they said 90% of the comments are made by 10% of the people. Yeah. We have to remember that. And that really is true, unfortunately, in some cases where you have the 10% that wants to feed the sometimes the worst, kind of discourse are often the loudest, and they have the most drive to publish a lot of comments. And I think, but we can't really get around this. So just something I want to put it in.
Yeah, it's true. And it's just to continue on a little bit about that before we get into the efficiency problem.
Yeah.
I think this is the main mistake that people thought social media was designed for dialogue, but I don't think it was designed for dialogue. I think it was designed for just getting people together in a manner that they generate clicks and engagements. And because one of the things I've noticed having a pretty heavy user of social media and getting into talks and whatever is that it's been observed already that you dehumanize the other person because you only see some letters, you don't see anything nothing of the body language, nothing of the type of voice being used. There's
no context, there's no face, there's no nothing.
We talk to disembodied individuals. Even talking to you right now, face to face, feels different than when we talk over the phone. And it's clear that if those people would have the same conversation face to face, insults and wouldn't be flying that fast. People would be more careful, so they would be aware that they're dealing with a human that is addressing them. So again, I think it's sadly, and that's why I think YouTube, for instance, is better in some instances because you can go ahead, you can present your idea in a long video where you get to be uninterrupted, and then people can start duking at it and taking sides and whatever. So yeah, I think, and I've seen that we've addressed this and again, I've felt that again, that sense of exasperation. Like, people, can we have a civilized talk and we be human to each other? Because we're not doing ourselves a favor if we instantly, when we get on a topic, we start beating each other over the head. And there was one question I wanted to ask you. Obviously, it's going to be anecdotal to some respect. From my observations, it is more often the people that heavily favor electric cars that are likely to start attacking so-called petrol heads or people that is this true in your observation, or is it just maybe you think they're both equally or can be equally vitriolic?
I'm just gonna give you this is supported by nothing. This is supported by me reading comments, so I am not standing behind. It's sort of my impression. I'm gonna get you in.
Just for your personal experience. I'm not asking for a edict.
In the beginning, that's like me reading my comments and random comments online. So in the beginning, it was super aggressive from the EV side. In the beginning, that's what I saw. There was this there was the early days of Tesla. That's what I call it when it was this amazing hype where people were literally claiming in 5 years nobody's going to be driving, an ICE engine cars. It was massive hype, and that was the part where some people got on board of this train. It was pretty nasty. Then, as people saw that in 5 years not much changed, the early adopters, they 3, 4, 5% of people bought a Tesla. I don't know the numbers in each country. It's probably higher, somewhere lower, doesn't matter. So, and then you had this, the curve sort of flattened out, and then it sort of normalized. And then you got the petrol heads coming back. And now they were, whenever, and for example, you see a post on like a car news website or, media page, social media page. And then whenever they announced, Chevrolet is releasing the new EV, I don't know, Toyota just released a new EV, then you got this down in the comments, this swarm of like absolute hatred. Oh, another cell phone, another, horrible thing, this. And then the petrolheads came in. Now I think it's sort of balanced, and it depends on which kind of media outlet you go. If you go to a petrolhead-centric place, petrolhead, whatever that is, like car fan or place, you're going to see this, sort of hate towards EVs. It's not going to be hate. It's mostly, making fun of EVs. That's sort of the approach. And then if you go to websites which favor, EVs, you're going to see this. So people tend to, be tribalist. We congregate around things, equally minded people. So I guess that's what happens in the end.
Cool. Let's go back to the efficiency thing. So how do you think this debate should be framed? Again, what would you say that if someone would have to choose to just buy a car, and he would or she would think strictly in terms of efficiency? So it's not something about being an early adopter. It's not something about having to go fast. They just want to have an efficient car. How would you define efficiency in these terms, and how would you say this favors one choice over the other?
Yeah, I mean, from that's a really tough question, and I could do hours of mind-numbing stupidity. So, from a purely scientific physics perspective, you would define thermal efficiency as you have an amount of energy. Let's say a liter of fuel has a certain amount of energy, and as we know, fuel is very energy dense. Right. And then how much usable work are you going to extract from this energy? And if you take that purely physics approach, an engine, a really efficient engine nowadays, like, I don't know, Toyota's latest dynamic force engines, if you want to use an example, they can manage like 40% efficiency, 41% efficiency, which for a gasoline spark ignited engine is crazy amazing. But even that is not over the entire RPM range. You have a little segment of RPM where it achieves this efficiency, let's say 4,000 RPM. So we get 41%. If you compare that to an electric motor does what? 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, I don't know, it depends on the electric motor. So, and of course, the electric motor is more efficient. But then and so from that perspective, purely physics, the electric motor is more efficient, no doubt about it. But of course, whenever you want to do something and buy something, you of course have to look at the reality and practicality of your life and what you need and what you do every day and where you go. So if you're somebody that does a lot of mileage every day, for example, let's say you drive to work every day, 50 kilometers. There's a million people in Europe, not millions who drive that much. And if you do that kind of driving and then you have to go somewhere on the weekend and, then you get into the concerns of range. And of course, as we know, this is sort of the issue with electric cars. So the electric motor is extremely efficient. I mean, I'm just saying things everybody knows here. But the electric motor is very efficient, but, it needs power from a battery. And the weakness, the extreme strength of electric cars is the electric motor because it's purely rotation. It's this beautifully simple device. You're not converting reciprocation into rotation. You're not doing any sort of nonsense. It is pure, instant. It's just torque right there. I mean, it does fall off. It's like it makes massive torque like when it starts the electric motor, but you have this curve which falls off, and whereas a combustion engine can maintain massive torque for very prolonged periods of time, like equal constant torque. Not very important for day-to-day use, but I just had to say it. Now, of course, the power comes from the battery. The batteries that we have right now, with the liquid electrolytes in them, as we know, we all know what the drawbacks are. When it's cold, they suck. They have this limited life cycle, yada, yada, yada. I think a lot of people are talking now about it, not now, for the last, decades, and companies have invested billions, as far as I know, is the solid state battery. So if this is achieved in a way that people are talking, there's like a million obstacles on the way, But if it is achieved in a way that is cost effective, so they make a car that does not cost 100,000 euros, they make a car that costs as much as an equivalent combustion car. If that happens, if they get into the, economies of scale, if they can turn the process into mass production, a process of mass production that works, that is cost effective, they put this in cars, I think we would eliminate the problems with the battery. And in that regard, from a practical standpoint, I think the electric car wins. From a standpoint of you have something that's, it has the range, you get the efficiency, you have the recharging. These batteries are supposed to be extremely quickly recharged. And then the only argument that the combustion car has is really emotion, is enjoyment, is thrill. And it goes into a comparison of why do some people still like to listen to music on records? Because of the emotion, because of the enjoyment, because it's irreplaceable. I can give you the craziest hi-fi, sound station system, and you're going to have many people say, please give me my record. Thank you very much. And I'm certain that in the future, if and when solid-state batteries do come around, or whatever else is the holy grail of batteries, the electric car might dominate. But you're still going to have, I think, massive amounts of people, depending on the legislation, that are going to keep enjoying. And in terms of the sheer thrill and emotion and excitement, and this, I don't think we're going to replace the combustion car with electricity, maybe ever. I mean, they have some cars nowadays that do the sound and they fake it, and it's fun. I admit it's fun. I want to try it. Yeah. But is it going to be that? Is it going to be the true thing? No, never.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm really glad you brought up the sound part, because I had that question set up for later. But if you brought it now, I'm gonna touch on it now. And we are talking, if our audience doesn't know about it, we're talking about those electric cars that have like subwoofers that sound like a car engine, to just give you that thrill or of driving an actual ICE car. So I think that's, to me, it was great to me to see that, and it brought me back. And I'm gonna get a little bit philosophical here, excuse me, but there is this thing. If you read the Jungle Book, Kipling's Jungle Book, there is a passage there where the monkeys are asking Mowgli to teach them how to create fire, how to make fire, so they can be like humans. So but there was still, even if he taught them to make fire, they would still remain monkeys. So I think it's the same thing here, where there is this value, there is this thrill, which people say, well, it's a cheap thing. Well, it's not, because it has to do with how you feel about it. It expresses something of your personality. And I think it's a very big thing that we tend to imitate things. There is a class of people that want to throw away, for instance, internal combustion cars, but they would still want to retain some of that. And it's in this, and at least in this particular thing, again, it looks like it's a mockery. We're going to shun and reject that type of technology, but we're still clinging to the sound of it. And I think it's not something superficial. It's not something shallow. I think it speaks to something that people need, and that will be also reflected in consumer preference, obviously, because some consumers will like that sound. Some consumers may pick a car just because it sounds cool, instead of whenever you hear like the electric car just whooshing by, and if it doesn't run you over because you didn't hear it, it's. So yeah, I think this is again, it's interesting that people still hold that dear, the sound of the engine. So what would you think about that? In terms of psychological terms, in terms of your relationship with the car. So, and you being a better, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. I mean, these are, in general, I think there's so much debate between electric and combustion car, because it's also a really interesting topic. It's like fun to talk about. You have these, it's like a clash of two worlds, and it also a clash of different types of people. You have like these, you have petrol heads, you have tech lovers, you have, I think, a lot of people who love EVs sort of embraced them the first time they came around because they were kind of frustrated with also combustion cars. Because when you think about an engine is sort of, I don't know if I can say it, like a pain in the ass. When you first start to look at it, it's so complicated. You have valves, you have cams, you have pistons, and so many people think it's like, I don't want to deal with this, and there's something wrong with their car, and they have to ask their uncle, what's wrong there? You have to bring it to 6 mechanics, and then they develop this, hate relationship, and then they see an electric car. This is going to be so simple. I'm going to be free. It's really not. Nothing that is a vehicle that moves is ever going to be truly simple, and you're still going to need somebody to fix it and service it. We're not escaping any of that. Sorry, coming back to the sound. I don't know. That's a really tough one. If you ask me, I think people are, number one, egoistic. We want to cherry pick everything that we enjoy. We want to have, I like the sound. I'm gonna pick the sound. I don't like the oil. I have to change the oil. I don't want that. So we want to cherry pick just the benefit and get rid of everything. And people, I don't think most people nowadays, they're just, hedonists. They're interest driven, enjoyment driven. They don't really care about principles. They don't really care about brands. They don't really care about anything. Like where it comes from, who made it, I don't care. I just want to feel good. And we have this egoism in society. And I don't know, it's understandable. Who am I to criticize anybody? When it comes to fake sound versus real sound, I'm gonna tell you my perspective. I'm very pragmatic in that regard. And if you ask me what to choose, I would rather choose fake sound than no sound at all. It's not from a perspective of philosophy. It is kind of cringy. You're like using electric power to send it to the speakers to create fake sound. But the day if I buy an EV, the first thing I'm going to install is the fake sound, because you can also look at it like this. What would you choose between never having sex at all or having sex with a sex robot, electric doll, or whatever? I mean, it came to my mind. I mean, it's cringe, right? But it's better than not having sex ever. So, I don't know. It's like that sort of... They have a massive debate with... people are also working on like fake manual shifters. That's even worse. It's like you're reducing efficiency and acceleration time to fake shifting that doesn't exist. It's like they're doing that as well. And I would choose...
That's even more silly.
It's even more, but I would use it because when I get into that car, we spent money on it, I bought it, and it is for me there. It's for my emotion, my half an hour to the mountains. I want to have fun. And if I don't have any other choice, I'm going to go with the fake crap because that's what I have, if I'm forced. If I'm not forced, obviously, you know what I'm going to choose.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about, I mean, from the videos I've seen in your channel, you talk a lot about how much the internal combustion engine has evolved. And it clearly, even for the neophytes such as I am, you look at two engines there is definitely an evolution there. And I wanted to ask you, so this is your 2-point question. So one, if you could name some evolutions in the internal combustion engines, like 2 or 3 that you think they were critical or stellar or excellent during this like 100-year period. And second, if there are disadvantages from seeking this kind of efficiency, because I know there is, as far as I know, there are disadvantages when you try to make engines way too efficient. And so this should be the 2-part question. So one, if you could tell me just a few 2 or 3 moments in the history of internal combustion engine that I think they're important moments, and then if you think there is a limit to efficiency or there is a limit to how much we should be looking for if squeezing all the efficiency out of an internal combustion engine.
Yeah. A really nice question. I'm loving questions. For the massive moments of, like, you have a couple probably the biggest one, and this is the nicest example, is when we went from carburetors to electronic fuel injection. This was a big thing, and you can look at many things, like big changes in many technologies. This is a really nice example. When you had initially massive resistance from people who said, I do not want to deal with sensors. I do not want to deal with, electronics, the mechanics, the early, like when the shift started. And I've talked about so many older mechanics about this, and you can hear the craziest and the most interesting stories from them, how much resistance they were putting up. Because a carburetor is a purely mechanical thing. Yeah. You have a couple of screwdrivers, you already know the drill, and you set it up. And this is something, you have guidebooks and you have courses and you have, it can help. But ultimately, what a carburetor is 90%, in my experience, it is 90% experience. Dealing with messing about carburetors, you develop a sixth sense for it, you develop an ear for it, and then, that's there it is now. It's like, then you blip the throttle, okay, now it's good. And I've seen mechanics who are magicians with it, and it's such a joy to see. And, when you see, I struggled, I put like carburetors in my car, and it took me a year to get like basic knowledge of how to do it. And then I took it to an experienced mechanic, and it took like a long screwdriver just to get it in there, ear, pop, like I don't know, 2 minutes, and the car is like a different car. It ran much nicer than what I could set up. And then you pick it up, and then they just went to electronic fuel injection, where everybody can set up a car. There's a sensor. You put a diagnostic tool in it. Your O2 sensor is bad. You took it. You remove it, put it in. And the early mechanics, they really struggled with the change. But it was ultimately a good change. And it proved that it was better. An electronic fuel injection car, it starts easy. It doesn't lose its tune unless you mess about. But those carburetors, especially older ones, over time, you have to retune it once a year. That's why they call it tune-up. It doesn't exist anymore. It's like you have to put it back into its sweet spot. Electronic fuel injection, look at a Toyota from the 90s. Nobody ever touched anything. And it goes every like 500,000 miles. So that was probably a big step. Then after that, we went with, I think, the next big sort of thing, and I'm talking about gasoline stuff, is, of course, and I'm talking about, there's a big thing before that big thing. It's turbocharging. It's forced induction. That was the next jump. After that, we have direct fuel injection. And then nowadays, not really much. Nowadays, they're working mostly on, material science, where they're trying to squeeze at every last little bit of, efficiency. Recently, I've seen totally new procedures that create ultra low friction cylinder bores. So they lose that last little 2%, 0.1% of friction, so they can get a little bit of better fuel economy. So just to sum it up, I can talk a lot. Just cut me off if you need to. So it was fuel injection, moving to electronic fuel injection, then forced induction, and then I'm going to say direct injection. Direct injection was both a good and a bad thing. It's mostly driven by this emissions and efficiency, and port injection. If you don't have if you don't have emissions regulations, port injection can work until the end of time. Now, what was the second part of the question? I guess
the second part, if there is, because you talked about this.
If there is a price making it more efficient.
Is it a point where trying to squeeze that efficiency will make a worse engine or a less reliable engine, or
realistically, my honest opinion is that in some regard, it depends on how you do it.
Right.
You can make a very efficient engine. You can have, there's like a menu of 3 things. You can have it very efficient, you can have it very reliable, or you can have it cheap. You have to choose 2.
That works for a lot of things.
Yeah, that works for everything. So, and nowadays they're trying this. I mean, I talked about this in one of my videos as well. It's almost like you have to change your car as often as possible. And this is the sort of the smartphone culture. It's the new phone is out. I'm buying the new phone. Do you need it? Who cares? Buy the new phone. So buy the new car. It now has these LED lights. Buy the new car. It has a bigger screen. Buy it. It's this bombardment. So, and car makers, they're reflecting this. Why should they invest in this beautifully indestructible, reliable engine that's going to be realistically environmentally friendly if it's going to last a long time? Nobody does that. Most manufacturers don't do that. So there is a price. Doing the efficiency by itself, reducing the Does efficiency by itself reduce how good the engine is? In a way, yes. Because nowadays, for example, look at the engines nowadays. You're going to have a very overstroke engine. Undersquare. Undersquare is the proper word. Undersquare, you're going to have very small bore. You're going to have a massive stroke. This helps with the low down torque. It helps with efficiency because it also reduces. They want to have the piston rings be as small as possible, because the bigger the piston ring, the more area over which unburned hydrocarbons, they can escape. That impacts emissions. So ideally they want a bottle cap piston, that somehow makes power, because that minimizes emissions. And an undersquare engine is less fun. This is my opinion, and most other people like engines, is less fun than an oversquare engine, because you have this sort of, an engine is happiest. I think it was the happiest. It reached its sort of peak of how fun it is and how emotional it is, like 80s, 90s, early 2000s. That's where you had these engines. You had the good technology. You had like fuel injection, port fuel injection. You had all the science to make everything reliable, to make the best crankshaft, the best pistons, you had the perfect machining, and you still weren't hampered by forcing everything to be uber efficient. And so that's where you had these engines, and that's where they want to, an engine wants to run kind of rich. It's like, wants to run a bit rich. If you want maximum power, if you want fun, if you want, then it wants to run a bit rich. An engine, by its nature, doesn't really want to be totally clean and crazy efficient. We have to be realistic. It is a product from the industrial age. It's a beautiful product, but it is a product from that time. And its anatomy in the heart of the engine, I mean, it's based on a steam engine. When you look at it, you have the crank, you have the pressure. It's that kind of creature.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned we were talking about consumer preference and about this thing that people want to cherry pick, but at the same time have everything. And again, in terms of economics, it's this thing that, and of morality and philosophies, people don't understand. You really can have it all. You will have to gauge your preferences and say, I'm gonna take 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 because that is what matters to me most. And again, it's a pity that we're unlearning how to make choices, how to choose to even admit that, because I heard people being very critical of other people. Look, that guy bought a huge engine car and he's gonna put, well, it's his choice. He likes it. It's not going. Not buying that car is not going to. It's suddenly bring on Captain Planet and save the world, and just let the guy have his fun. Even with an older car, which may be more serviceable than a newer car, maybe they will just keep tinkering on it. I think you were talking one of your videos about the American guy, the Volvo car that has 3 million miles or something like that, which is insane. So about 3 million miles is like 5 billion kilometers or something like that. It's just absolutely incredible. So I'm pretty sure that car, it's more efficient in terms of the damage it does to the environment, being used for so many years, and repairing items and keeping just replacing things instead of just replacing the whole thing. So now we're getting to the thing where it's we get more political in a way, or we look at policies. Because if we look at, say, the Tesla Model S and the Ford Model T, the amount of time it took for one to evolve and to be fully adopted and get its price low greatly favors the Ford Model T and the ICE engines in general. So right now we have 10, 12 years since the Model S has been released, and still, electric cars have benefited from a level of regulations and incentives that was completely inexistent during when ICE engines came about. You have regulations, you have tax exemptions, you have all this kind of stuff that it's been politically designed to work in favor of electric cars. and still people won't buy electric cars. You get incentives, you get paid from other people's taxes to buy yourself an electric car, and people still say, no, I'm still going to go with the IC engine. So what would you say are some of the reasons for that? I mean, not all, because obviously we could have a separate interview just on that alone. But I just wanted to so again, differences in adoption rate and the price range for one type of engine, namely the IC engine was way better than for the electric cars, although electric cars benefited from a lot of government support. So what do you think is that difference in adoption?
Yeah, I mean, it's the simplest way to look at it is the ICE car. It had an easier battle. It was replacing what? The horse. It was replacing walking or foot. It wasn't that hard of a sell. And you give somebody an automated vehicle, they can start it themselves, they can move around with it. It was a decent price back then. The Ford Model T was affordable when it got into its own. It was pretty affordable for most people. Yeah. So it was a much bigger jump. You're jumping from a horse and I don't know what carriage to a car. Right. Now you're jumping from a car that is comfortable, works, fast, fun, efficient, cheap, and you're jumping to another car that is just driven by something else. So the electric car is trying to win a much harder battle. It's trying to win 100 years of investment and evolution. I think God, imagine the number, like how much money was invested into making cars, ICE engine, like ICE cars better. God knows. It's not even, I don't think they have a number. I think the number was, Google is like a giant number.
Yeah.
It's a number. It's some insanity. So the electric car actually did, in my opinion, it did pretty well. I mean, to even gain any sort of foothold. And in Tesla's case, I think that was really helped by the particular marketing approach from Tesla and, how they did things. And of course, I think without the government subsidies and the push and what the governments did, I think that what the electric car achieved so far would be much smaller because, again, it's trying to win a pretty hard battle. And people, the other, I think, thing that should be said is that people, don't like to change habits that much. They're used to something. And if you offer them something, for them to go to something new, it has to be like instantly, radically, undeniably better. Like when you look at a horse and how much a horse can do in one day and how far can it go and how much can you carry with a horse, and you compare it to a car, there's no debate. It's nothing. Yeah. It's over immediately. The car can do so much more. Even a crappy old car can do
and
more.
Probably cheaper as well, at least in time. So yeah.
And then I think again, watch, we're gonna get into the same argument. I think somebody who rides horses, like rides them, really like enjoys them, knows about horses, is probably gonna tell you a horse is 1,000,000 times more emotional and enjoyable. And imagine galloping a horse through somewhere at maximum speed. I never did it, but imagine the thrill. Yeah. And I think that person will tell you, hey, we got into cars. It's fine, but we lost the emotion. What I'm telling you now might be happening. So I think it's like we always give up a bit of, connection, emotion. There's something that we have for efficiency, for the future. And that's why in movies, when you look at future, it's always this, sterile whiteness. Everything is flowing. Everything is, is it good? Who knows? So, yeah.
It's this thing, it's because, and we were returning to discussion we had earlier, returning to discussion we had earlier about consumer preference and the human action, where, yes, if you have a horse, you breed horse, but good breed horse, and you ride it through the plains and woods and whatever, it's like having a Ferrari.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you drive a horse, a horse carriage, and you just haul whiskey from one neighborhood to another in New York, it's the equivalent of just driving an Uber. And then the difference is you're probably not going to, my Uber sounds so good, or you're even if for your carriage, you don't have two horses that will be nowhere as valuable and as spectacular as the racehorse or whatever. And again, it's clearly if that's a preference, that's something you do out of pleasure, yes. But then you get into the day-to-day use, where people would just need, look, I just want this car to not consume a lot of fuel, not be easy to park. Although this is just a small parenthesis I'm opening here about people. We have it here in Romania. I'm not sure if the rest of Europe is the same, but in here, especially Bucharest, which was not designed for the amount of cars it has today. So probably the city would comfortably hold about maybe 200,000 cars without having, huge problems. Now I think you probably have about 1.7 million. And still people keep buying large cars. They keep buying SUVs and crossovers and whatever. And obviously they hog up the place. They're struggling to find parking space because so I'm not sure if this happens in the rest of Europe. But and then again, you get a preference. If the guy, if they want to buy an SUV, so you can go ahead, buy an SUV. But you're going to have to assume that you're going to have more issues with parking. You're going to say you're going to have to accept that if you want an SUV for your own liking, there is a price to pay for that. Like a nervous breakdown because you can't find some parking space. So it's and again, it's this thing where we. And we're going to get into that immediately, where we have a certain type of policy which it tries to be, it's being imposed to everyone regardless. We have this guy in Romania. He's a bit of an influencer, and I think he if I'm not mistaken, he once mentioned Norway, and he said, "Look at Norwegians; they all have electric cars, and of course they do, because they have all the incentives in the world. The energy is cheap because they're literally sitting on on petroleum, and obviously they are going to get." Although I hear that even the Norwegian government is stepping back a little bit, because people are beginning to question, saying, "Look, this is unfair. Those guys are getting way too many advantages in terms of where they're allowed to park, how many taxes they have to pay less taxes." So again, try applying the same policy as the European Union is doing right now, and not only the European Union. Try applying the same policy in Norway, where you have a certain kind of people or certain kind of economic environment and geography, and try applying that in Romania. It's not going to work. So it's And now I want to get to one of the videos that I like the most in your channel. It's the one that actually triggered me. I have to have this guy on the show. Is the one where you talk about how the European Union actually implemented policy that favored diesel engines. And one of the reasons they touted back then was that diesel engines were helping reduce emissions, fight climate change, all that kind of stuff. Now, the diesel engine is the devil incarnate. It's the worst thing that ever happened to environment. And they're saying, no. Now we have to go to electric cars. And in my head, in my mind, I'm saying, look, you guys told me to do that to combat climate change. Now you're telling me that thing is hurting the climate, and you're proposing another solution. How much can I actually trust those guys? The bureaucrats of the whole system to actually come up with solutions that people didn't even ask for, Joey. No, it's just some bureaucrats somewhere. So how would you see this relationship, this what I see as an encroachment, an excessive encroachment of policies into consumer choice, especially when the policies clearly fail, they're wrong?
When it comes to governments, I mean, that's so you could write a book. I think that nowadays we have secular government, right? Government and religion is separated, whatever that religion may. So it's separated. Yeah. But what I think never actually happened, and this is just very subjective, but I think the government never lost that sort of, behavior that the church or whatever had. And that is saying, we have this, we're going to do this, this is truth, we are right, there is no debate about it. remember a recent, I'm not going to say it so your video doesn't get banged, a recent outbreak of whatever. And I remember, for me, that was the biggest wake-up call ever, because I remember we were all, at the very beginning, we were all afraid. And every day, you were getting some sort of new info and new instructions. And every time you got instructions, it was, this is it. This is true. We know it all. We know what is right. And then 5 days later, that instructions are necessary. That was not necessary. That was useless. I remember I was buying stuff at the supermarket. I'm like spraying everything like an idiot. And, it's like, and then somebody tells me, and a doctor tells you, what are you doing? It's like, you don't do that. And I'm like, but they told me, no, and you were constantly in this. And I think a lot of people lost faith in government during that time.
Yeah.
And what I would like to, and the diesel thing is like, it's looking like a repeat. The EV thing is looking like it's going to be a repeat of the diesel thing. Now, I do believe that governments, they need to do, something. They need to try and direct society. I don't think that, I think they need to play a role, right? Like, because tomorrow people are also really egoistic. People are just going to be doing, whatever they want, whatever is good for them until we burn. And people are only going to stop. Oh, it's burning. Now I'm going to stop. So the government sort of has a role to try and prevent that scenario. Right. But what I would really like to see from the government is in a type of behavior, an approach where they say, look, we have this data now from these scientific reports. And we hope this is true, because science is somehow, often nowadays, science, it looks like religion. It's like, this is true. There is no debate about it. Yeah. And you try to have a dialogue. You're the demon. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not crazy. I just want to ask a question. When has it become bad to ask a question? I hate this. This is very dangerous. This is how Hitler got onto power. He didn't let people ask questions. Right. So if you kill dialogue, and if you kill the ability to ask a question and raise doubt, you're killing what is the fabric of modern society. And what I want governments to say is, okay, we have this data. We hope it's correct. We would like to try this for 10 years to see if it works. And if it doesn't, we're not going to punish the adopters of this that we propose. Because look at people who bought a diesel car. They bought it, remember those, like the ones that bought it right at the correct time. Like they bought it, and right in 10 years, when it was time for them to sell it, they got the worst taxes and everything. People bought a car, let's say 50,000 euros. Their resale value was destroyed. In some countries in Europe, it was obliterated. They sold the same car for like a fraction of the price. Yeah. And they were punished. I mean, they listened to what the government says. And they said, I want to reduce CO2. I want to be a good person. I want to help the planet. And they bought it and they were punished. And now you could have the same thing. Like, I'm going to buy an EV now. And it doesn't even have to be the government. You could be punished by a change in technology. And then the government's going to say, this technology gets the taxes. And you who bought the old technology, oh, you're screwed. And so I would like the government to say, we're going to try this. We feel, based on the data, this might work for the benefit of everyone. If it doesn't, we're going to roll back this, and we're not going to punish everyone. And you know what they should subsidize? They should subsidize the people who are about to suffer from their rollback of policies, because it didn't work. So there has to be accountability. You're trying something. You're not presenting yourself as the new God that knows everything, because you don't. Because nobody knows anything. None of us. It doesn't matter how much money and scientific, data you have. You don't know everything. That's the nature of existence. You don't know everything. So let's be honest. I want an honest government, a honest, realistic, objective government that says, we want to try this. We think it might work. What I would really want is for them to say the true motivation. And what I really think always is the true motivation in politics, in war, in everything. It is always interest, control, and power. And I think realistically, behind the diesel as well, I didn't say this on the channel because I can't get into that debate because there are levels of horrible debate. I think one of the main motivations behind diesel was to hopefully lose, some dependency. The West wants to lose dependency on foreign energy. Right. And I think this is what EVs are, like a major part of them probably are. I don't know, but it's like logic sort of tells me that. It's like if you have EVs, you do not depend on fuel from the Middle East. You do not depend on fuel from Russia, on gas from Russia or from Middle East or from whoever, because we know Europe doesn't really have, significant energy. So, but what I think we might be getting into the EVs, it's going to look maybe, and this is just you and me having a chat. When I say something, I really want people to understand it. I'm not saying I know what it is. This is true. I'm right. I'm just we're
just talking ideas here. We're just trying to make sense of what the present with the information right now, and we estimate where it's going to go. So
what I'm afraid what might happen is that we're going to go into colonialism all over. It's going to be neo-colonialism.
Right.
Because who has the most, lithium, cobalt, nickel, whatever? It's usually third world countries. And of course, it's great to export all the crap and pollution to them. We're going to get clean cars. We're going to say there's zero emissions, and we're going to export the horrible emissions to these countries. We're going to destroy their nature. We're going to destroy everything. Why? Because we can. Because the world is a place of, who has more power. If you're stronger than me, you're going to twist my hand, and that's going to be the end.
Right.
And realistically, we have not evolved past this.
It's interesting that you brought up this concept, this observation that you had, that governments started acting like churches, because it's one of the topics. Since we're in here on our channels, we're concerned with politics and philosophy. We've been talking about this topic a lot, and something that also came along in James Lindsay's lectures on YouTube. I'm going to give you the link after that, and I'm going to put a link in the comments as well, is that many people say that Karl Marx was an economist, and he looked to solve an economic problem. James Lindsay comes along, and he was a theologian. He just changed, and this change comes along starting with the French Revolution. With the French Revolution, what does it do? They take God down. They say, God is not good. We're going to replace it with a new religion. They restart the calendar. They start. And this is what happens. It's being transported from the French Revolution in different evolves a lot of time. It takes different shapes, but then it gets to a point. And there is a Brazilian author, died quite a few years ago, who actually says that one of the things this kind of movement, especially the steering from Marxism, does is it invests nature with a sort of divinity, and where you have to save the nature. And you see that, especially in left-leaning parties, there's always this thing, we're going to save things. We're going to save the planet. We're going to save the kids. We're going to save, I don't know what, bird. And then you get into governments which take on this godly, authority. And again, there is no debate because, and like you said, we're supposedly living in liberal democracy. But God forbid you'd criticize any of your institutions, any of your policies, because you're automatically being cast as an enemy, as people, because people right now are saying, well, we're evolved. We're not like those backwards religious people from the 15th century. Well, if someone comes along and contradicts what you're saying, you're acting exactly like those people. Okay, you're not going to burn into the stake because the law won't allow you, but the psychological and the reaction is the same. You're going to shun that person. You're not going to try to hear what they want to say. And again, the matter, as you say, gets even worse when you try to make a God from science, because science is supposed to be, it's especially when it comes to, again, the event that we're not going to mention. It was this thing. Well, it is the consensus. Well, the science is about that single guy that comes along and says, well, I know this is your consensus, but it's wrong. I mean, think of Newton, think of Galileo and all other people who said, look, I know this is the consensus, guys, and I respect you. I don't want to, make you feel bad about it, but you're wrong. And please allow me to, because I don't want to, I don't, especially enjoy making you feel bad, but we want to find a solution. So, and again, this was very visible during 2020, 2021, where the science changed every 2 weeks. But you still got, like you said, like with the cars, you got punished. So if you didn't comply to the science valid between June and July, you would get punished. And when that science changed, nobody said, well, guys, we're sorry we punished you for that. And I think this is, again, extremely detrimental for society and for, especially when, the best thing you can do for us is shut up and just follow the rules, follow the science. This thing with the trust us. So I had this thing where people said, believe in science. What do we believe in science? It's not religion. I'm a practicing Christian, and I believe in God. If you tell me believe in science, I have like suddenly a million red flags, in my head, right? What do we mean believe in science?
Science never asks to be believed in, so it's not what it wants. It wants to give you, empirical data. That's it. And then you make a decision based on this empirical data. And tomorrow you may have better insight and better data, and it's going to be something else. It's never going to tell you believe in. There's no need for emotion. Science is intrinsically emotionless.
Yeah, or at least it should be. I mean, and I think it's really bad that this happened, and it's killing and this thing where we say people, it applies during 2020, 2021. It applies to discussion about electric cars, energy sources, whatever. You see people, you are anti-science. You should believe the science.
Labels are the biggest tool of like dialogue here. And I know when I say when I talked in some of my videos, I got so many comments like, you're a communist. I'm not a communist. What is wrong with you? I'm not a communist. It's like, based on what? Or you say something else. Oh, you're anti-democratic. You're neoliberal. And then you get the same video. I had the same video where I do different, totally opposed things.
Yeah. And you're accused of being both. It happens to me as well. So it's
like, what? I don't know. It's really hard. I think we're at a point where hopefully we have to evolve into like, I don't know the word for it. I'm not that good at this. Like, into true honesty, into like being open about it. When you don't know it, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay. And this should not. I think we have this archaic mindset where, for example, where a government still thinks that if it says, I don't know, it looks weak, stupid, uninformed, and it's going to be toppled and overthrown. It's not. It's okay. I don't know. It's okay. And we're trying to figure it out. I mean, I think there's also, I don't know. I mean, the internet is, I think also in a way it's helping the government, but it's also a potential downfall of government when you think about it. Because I remember reading about direct democracy when I was in university. And like in Athens, at least that's what is said in the book, that in Athens in the early days, they had direct democracy, where you had all of the citizens, they come onto the square because there's not a lot of citizens, right? Yeah. They all come into the square and everybody brings like a piece of roof shingle. I think it's called a shingle. And they have like a guy on a stage and he says, what should we do about the water that broke out in 6th Street? And they have like 3 or 2 ideas. And people put shingles in the boxes and they count the shingles. The people have decided we should turn this into a river. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But, that's democracy, in my opinion. That's democracy. What we do now is pseudo-democracy. You elect somebody for whatever, years, 2, 4, 6. And during those years, there's so little accountability. They promise you A, B, C, D, and then they do X, Y, Z. And what really happens is the media puts a microphone on them and they say, I couldn't do it. and they continue the term. Usually, they continue the
They
term.
don't ever say that. What they usually say, and it happened
They find an excuse.
during 2020, 2021, what they usually say is it drives me crazy when I hear it. It's like mistakes have been made. Who has made them? It's like they never even take accountability for unless it's something blatantly true. I mean, it's obvious that they did it. They were the ones that did the mistake. There's always going to be always going to put this mistake in some void, some indefinite space where no one said.
You use in grammar, when you use passive in grammar, you get rid of the subject. There's no subject.
Yeah, and it happens in Romania as well. It's the same. We're using the passive, and it's mistakes have been made. Who made them? It's they didn't make themselves. It's so true. And with this, we're gonna get to the next question. So we're talking about the science, and I heard it again during 2021, 2020, and also relating to energy policies, including electric cars. People saying, well, the population is stupid. They can't understand the science. But very rarely you hear someone say, well, maybe your argument is wrong. Maybe you did not convince the population, because if you come along as a scientist or as a university or as the government and say, look, the science says X, and because of X, you're going to have to make A, B, and C sacrifices. Pay higher taxes or use certain type of car. Well, it's you who should be doing the convincing. And if you fail to convince people, just saying that all people are stupid and idiots and greedy, it's not going to work, because, again, the government, it's made up of the very same people. They have the same issues. They're also greedy. They're also imperfect as anyway. So this thing, maybe you can try to convince more, and this doesn't work well, as we discovered in today's environment, where it's more about being right than actually getting to the truth of the matter. So let me see.
No, let me just before we get to the next one. I mean, what you're saying is to connect to it. That's why I mentioned the democracy as well. I think this is also a problem we're having, because people it's not a problem, I don't know, but it's like people are getting more informed. They're more knowledgeable, and they're also at the same time kind of losing trust to government. And I think at the same time, we nowadays have a tool. That's why I mentioned direct democracy. When you think about it, we could have true direct democracy nowadays. We all have this, right? At all times with our hand, we're all connected. I mean, there is very little, realistically, of course, it's not going to happen, but Reddit. You have Reddit.
Yeah.
Why not have democracy work like Reddit? Reddit is not ideal, I'm going to admit. Nothing is ideal. But why not have you open your app and it's called My Government? I'm going to call it My Government. You open your app and you're going to say, there are these laws that are about to be implemented. Yeah. And you, as the user, if you're interested, if you want to do it, if you want to be an informed, contributing, participating citizen, you open your app and you say, this law, what should I vote on it? We vote on individual things, not the person that represents us, but we make the actual decisions, like in direct democracy. And I think people don't talk about this yet, but I think there is somewhere there in the background this opinion that this or the internet could undermine government as we know it. Yeah. And when you combine this with the losing of trust, I'm kind of talking like fantasizing here, but it is sort of a thing that could undermine democracy. And so I think this is why government, not democracy, but government, and this is why government is pushing towards this, maybe not pushing, but it's going for this, I'm right, I know what it is.
Yeah.
Because if you in a time like this, I mean, there's always multiple sides. If in a time like this, you would say that you don't know what I'm asking for, if you say you don't know, I'm not sure, try to be more honest, I think the masses might respond to, the government doesn't know anything. It might be the final nail in the coffin. I don't know. I'm
glad we're having this conversation, because I think these topics are related, and I hope the audience will forgive us if we stay a bit in this pocket, because I think it's important. So to me, as a say a scholar of politics and history, when it comes to democracy, I think there's two things that we should have in mind. So one, today democracy it's mostly an illusion, because what you have today is, again, like you said, in some countries you don't even vote for people. You vote for people that are put on a party list, and then the party decides whoever, and then they all the parties, they want to be into power, and they will make these coalitions that you didn't vote for, you didn't agree with. One example,
It's kind of indirect democracy. You're right. Yeah, there's like a million steps where your vote dilutes into nothing.
yeah, and the problem is again that you would see coalitions that are how did you guys get together, because you're supposed to be on opposite sides of the and you see this, I think in last year French elections, where they just didn't want a certain party to come into power. And then you see the communists and the right and the socialists, everyone in the so-called right or the center right getting together just to prevent the other guys from getting into power, although the people actually voted for the other guys. And this happens over and over again. And you see here, it's all the same in the United States, where the system is a little bit set up a little bit differently. But that, democracy is good if whoever we like comes into power. If the other person that we don't like comes into power, suddenly democracy is not so good anymore. So this should be one thing. And the other thing about direct democracy is that I think it can work on smaller scales. So it can work up to the level of a city, as you would see in Athens. But once you get to larger proportions of populations, what you get you run a very serious risk of getting it mob rule, where you need mechanisms that would control that. And the founding fathers of the United States actually made that in the Senate, which was kind of the Council of the Elders, where initially the Senate was set up in such a way that you would get there quality people, all right? So the Senate, and even today, the role of the Senate is pretty much the same, is to moderate any excesses that, the population. So say the population would say, well, maybe we should enslave a certain part of race. And then the Senate, the Council of the Elders would say, well, that's not a good idea. We have to moderate that. So again, I don't think that direct democracy is an option at the scale that we have right now. But you shouldn't be able to be left out to function at a city level. And to me, again, as a minimalist in this sort, I think the government should have as few options to interact with people's lives, and just leave as many options to the level of people, at the level of city. Just make sure people don't hurt each other, don't steal, and then just as a government, just again take care of this defense. Make sure people don't do stupid evil things, not stupid things, because you can't prevent people from doing stupid things. But don't interfere so much into people's lives. Let them just figure out things for themselves. Let them adapt to whatever situation. And then if the government doesn't have too many attributions, then you don't even need that much democracy either. Because if the government doesn't have the power to regulate in a certain aspect, then there is no government decision to be made. So then you can make that decision at a particular level. So again, democracy, I think it's right now this component where it's being hijacked, where yes, we go and vote and do have some say into who comes into power, but then they all go in their chambers and then negotiate, and they do things that we didn't actually vote for. It's an evolving thing. I actually heard this idea with the voting with your founders. A friend of a friend has got that idea. So it's definitely something that people are thinking about. And I think it would work at smaller scales, definitely. So, yeah. Okay, let's go.
Complicated, thing we could talk about is how
people have been trying to govern themselves for thousands of years, and we're still. It's a complicated thing. It obviously there are some layers of complexity added, especially as numbers increase. So it's something that we can, and it's a discussion that we should all have. I hate this thing where people say we're not discussing politics at family dinners. Well, maybe we should discuss them, but people lie to each other, And because otherwise, and then we ask ourselves why politics are going haywire. Maybe it's because we didn't talk about it. We just swept it under the rug just because we were afraid of having a debate. And then, surprise, you get the wrong politicians in power. Right. So that covers. I just wanted to ask you, but that kind of covers it. But if you want to go to, just please go on your stance on regulating cars. So, what would you think are good regulations? Just a few examples, maybe, versus bad regulations in terms of what cars people should drive, what cars people should use, so on and so forth.
Yeah, another tough one. Really tough one. You ask the fun and the hard questions at the same time. I mean, honestly, if I knew a good answer, if I thought I was qualified, I would probably maybe be in politics. But I'm not. Like I think we need regulations. And I'm going to talk about cars. I think we need regulations because if we didn't have them, I feel like, I mean, you had a part in the past of cars where, or like the PCV, and that's like your excess crankcase pressure. It was just like vented into nothing. It was vented into the atmosphere, and you literally had cars that were driving along the road, and from time to time they would like spit up like a bit of disgusting oil and crap and sludge from the engine, and you had this everywhere, and it was okay, because, and then governments realized, or whoever realized, people, I don't know, it was probably a community or I don't know, city-wide effort, whatever. They said this does not work. It's horrible. So then it was forced for the PCV to go back into the engine and to circulate it, just not out into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I think that's an example, very simple example of very necessary regulation. The question then becomes, where do you draw the line? And then I think here is the science. The science should help us draw a good line. And I recently read about, I forgot the name. There's an international organization that collects data every year and it publishes the dirtiest industries. Like what contributes most to air pollution, land pollution, water pollution. And of course, on the list of the top 10, you have like clothing industry, which is like dyeing clothes, getting them into a certain color, like massive damage. I think number 1 or number 2 was lead acid batteries. So not the batteries that you have in EVs, but the batteries that you have for your in every car, like for a starter motor and stuff like that. So that was also ranking very high up there. And then you had food. The food industry was producing like insane, like user transport, like personal transport was not in the top 10. So maybe that tells us the line where we should draw the line is to know exactly how much damage is personal transport creating. But again, you here enter into the problem of data collection and data processing. How can you be sure? How can you be sure that that's correct? Because if you hire 5 different companies, like that are massive international companies that do data and output statistics, you're going to get 5 different results. And then you won't be society is complicated. And you won't be able to stop them from getting there, throwing a wrench in there, putting money somewhere, and let's make the data look like that. So should things be regulated? Definitely. If we don't regulate things, I think we will live. I'm not, maybe, I don't know if you call that an anarchist, but I'm definitely not that. Yeah. I think you just let people, it's going to be craziness. If you look at the past where we didn't have much government, we also had, pillaging and crazy stuff. And nowadays we also have pillaging, but you just have strong governments pillaging the weak governments. So it's like, it depends on where you're born, how lucky you are. If you're born in a very nice first world Western, country, you're going to be fine. You're going to think governments are great. If you're born somewhere else, you're probably not so lucky. And you're immediately at like odds of total failure. So, I don't know. I have no good answer. I have nothing.
It is. It's complicated. And it is because like you said, there is a slippery slope there. So one of the positions that I hold generally is that, for instance, there is a very important difference, in my view, between law and regulation, and it goes back to, positive and negative rights, where you say and the role of government. And I believe the role of government is to protect the so-called negative rights, the right to life, liberty, and property, or, in the American version, the pursuit of happiness. And so the government should, so the laws are there to make sure that you don't hurt me and I don't hurt you. Regulations so they impose a negative on each other. They don't do that. Then regulations come along and they say you have to do that. So it's a positive. Yeah, and then and with that positive, it's adding a lot of, the chances of whoever is imposing that being wrong are pretty high. So that would be the main differences that I would see between. And I think that regulations, I would say yes, law, go ahead, have regulations, but again, try to have them at the city level first, or a county level first, or whatever. And then if those regulations work there, let them be adopted, organically by someone else. Don't impose like it happens today, like a EU-wide regulation. You enforce 500 million people to do the same thing. Just try it small scale, see if it works, and then if it does, people will imitate that. You won't have to impose it anymore. Other countries will.
Pilot it. What is it? Do an experiment. Try it. Pilot it.
Because if you're using the scientific method, just experiment. See if it works. Because if you're trying to just shove that down my throat, I'm starting to think that your intention is not good. That if you say, you guys are stupid, you don't understand, you're just going to do this from now on because you're all too such idiots that you won't be able to comprehend what stupendous idea we have. And it also goes to this thing where about the studies, where you always ask yourself, okay, who has done those studies, knowing already, again, after 2020, 2021, and even before that studies are, well, at least biased, to use an euphemism here. When we know we live in a publish or perish environment, and people will a lot of times will just publish stuff just to exist in the academic environment. And when you have studies like this, and I'm going to put it on the screen, we brought along, we discussed a lot on our channel about this particular study. So this is a study that was made was sponsored by the UK government. It was in collaboration with the Oxford University in Cambridge and Bath and Imperial College. So this is not something that came out of a basement of some lunatic, okay, supposedly. But what they propose, it's about, and I'm going to put it on the screen here. What they say for is that in between 2030 and 2049, this is only applies to the UK, but you can see similarities with other policies in other countries. So they say that in 2030, between 2030 and 2049, all remaining airports in the UK should be closed.
Yeah, I'm seeing it, and all shipping declines.
That's killing your population. This is not something you can do. And it's
sorry. I don't know. I want to know the context. They are.
I'm going to give you the study. I'm going to give you the study to read it, and I'm going to put it in the all in the links as well. So the study is called UK fires, like fires with a plural fire, although they didn't mean that probably. And I took a snippet from this thing in what they have in mind for road vehicles, and where they say, we have to reduce the weight, and the weight will create that result. So also it's very, wishy-washy. I mean, we wish it's very wishful thinking, but and they say. So I'm gonna switch to another slide if you remember what they said here. So they speak. So they say the transition to electric cars is already well underway. For increased demand. Well, this was back in 2023, I think, when they put.
Yeah, this was the initial. I remember the initial hype.
Costs will presumably fall. So they already had targets. Blah blah blah. So they say Yeah, so we will either use 40% fewer cars, or there will be 60% of the size. I mean, this seems like, okay, this is what you kind of have in mind. But then if you read down there, it says, well, we don't even have we can even recycle batteries the proper way. So, and again, the policies are being created and enacted based on these types of studies. So it's
yeah. I mean, I read a lot of. I used to work for international organizations for a couple of years. At the beginning of my government, I worked for the government. I worked for international organizations. I worked for NGOs. So about 5.5 years of that. And I read a lot of reports like this. And what I always like, how you undermine a report, if you want to undermine a report like this, is you ask how. That's the one question you ask, and that's never answered in any of this. They're always saying we're going to do this, is going to happen. They give you percentages. This should, we should end. So how? If you want to help somebody, tell me how. All shipping must end. How? What is your alternative? What are you going to do? Does the UK produce everything in this world? There are countries, I remember Albania a very long time ago, they tried to be a self-sufficient country, import nothing, export nothing. It did not end well. Look at North Korea, that's the same country. They don't really ship that much. I mean, they ship, yes, they do.
And like we were talking earlier, we tested that. We know it doesn't work, and it kills people, literally.
I mean, there's a level of craziness. I mean, you don't even need to test some things. Like, you don't need to test if I'm going to jump from the top of a building, I'm going to die. I don't need to test that. We live in a world where, all shipping must end. This looks a bit, I don't know the context. I don't want to judge. Anything. But whoever writes like a single sentence saying all shipping must end, just tell me how. I just want to, sure, fine, you're smart. Sure, just tell me how.
How am I going to get the food from point A to point B?
Not just food, like a million things you're shipping. Yeah. You're shipping like raw materials. You're shipping, I don't know, nuts and bolts.
Just going really, really down on the, on the Maslow's pyramid. Just give me the food and the materials. I need to build houses and wire, and then
I don't know. I like the 1,000 cars should be 1,000 kilograms. I made a video about it some time ago, and that I agree with. And so there's an example where it's like you have a really light car, really works. If you have like a very low mass, one of the problems we struggle with nowadays is like we're trying to increase fuel efficiency while the cars are constantly becoming heavier and larger and heavier. And if you look at this, for example, government regulation, the one thing where I want to see government regulation, but a government regulation, I think, led us to that, is all of these crossovers and SUVs. It's like when you look at a crossover as a vehicle, and I really don't want to insult anybody. I don't like using this tone and hostile language, but it really is. Some of these cars, some of them, not all of them, but some of them are really stupid. It's like, it's a stupid design. You have a car that is bulbous, like looks like an SUV for no reason other than to give the person like a feeling of I'm higher up. Or I don't know what's the point. You don't get much of anything. And your aerodynamics obviously suffer. It's not like a lower car is always going to be more fuel efficient if you have a more aerodynamic line. If you have a big bubble, it's very hard, or a big brick or whatever it is, it's hard to make it aerodynamic. You're increasing the weight because it's obviously bigger. And you cannot, it's like, imagine carrying 10 kilos versus 20 kilos. What's easier to carry? And I would like to see government regulation that really favors like a smaller car somehow, a lighter car. And that's where we should, there is no denying that less mass and less material hurts anybody. It's like it helps everybody because simply less is more in that regard. You spend less fuel, there's less emissions, you need a smaller engine, everything goes down. And if you go electric, you can get away with small batteries. They have one car, people taught me this in the comments of that video, like the Dacia Spring. It's really small, it's electric, it has a little bit of range, works for the people who have a lifestyle that it fits beautifully. It's cheap, and there's like one car like that on the market, maybe two. The rest are these, like, the rest of the electric cars, when you look at them, it's giant batteries, And when you have giant batteries, heavy, they're incredibly heavy, then you need giant brakes and you need giant tires. And for example, nobody talks about the emissions, brake dust, that's like massive emissions. That is bad stuff to inhale. And the bigger the car, the heavier the car, the more of that you're going to produce. The heavier the car, the bigger tires you need. And tires, tires wear out. Where do all the little particles go? They go into the environment.
I think they're actually worse than the stuff that comes out of the exhaust of of a normal engine, whatever comes from the brakes and the
of course, it heavily depends on the car. I mean, you can have really bad stuff. Again, I mean, you also need. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I saved myself with nuts and bolts. It's like I was in politics. I was in the government, as I told you, and at some point you see like there's no way out. It's like everybody thinks they know the answer, but nobody really knows anything. We're constantly like in this state of, I don't know, abstractness, and we can't fix it. And I remember I first started working on a car. Oh, it's a nut. There's a bolt. You tighten it. It's tight. I'm done. There's no debate. There's no discussion. It was for me.
Yeah.
It was for me so beautiful. It's like, okay, I'm out of this. What's right? Who's right? Who knows? I don't. Let me tighten the bolt. It even rhymes.
Yeah. It makes total sense. It's. I mean, engineering. It's beautiful. It's especially because like that it gives you this sense of things are set in stone. Okay? Physics is in stone, especially mechanics. I don't know quantum mechanics or whatever. We're not going to talk about that. But mechanics, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to
And you still have creativity. You still have endless options. You still have a blank canvas to do anything and create everything. You look at some of the novel engine designs people do. It's an incredible creativity. And it's beauty, and it's there, and it's fun, and it hurts nobody.
So let's get into greenwashing, because I think we already established between the two of us and for the audience that in this entire green trend, there is a clear ideological tinge to it. So we can discuss for hours how much that actually affects everything else, but it's definitely there. So both, I mean, green policies and greenwashing have a strong ideological tinge to them. So, and sometimes that tinge, I think, has deleterious effects on engineering and on the final product in the end. So, and not to mention that sometimes these so-called green policies are not even green at all. They just, like you said, they move pollution from one place to another, and then some guy gets to have like virtue signaling for not polluting because it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm not interested in what happens in whatever that battery is being built. So can you talk to me a little bit about how greenwashing can produce this kind of effects that supposedly it's supposed to actually prevent?
Yeah, I mean, like in any industry, you have that a lot with cars. I mean, nowadays you have so much of this, like we're using. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and it happens because it's a trend. You get to say, I'm green. And this is a shirt that was painted green, and probably the painting of this shirt harmed the environment to get it green. It's like you have this in cars now. I talk about this as well in a video. Like we use recycled plastic for a little bit of a bumper, but we made the car 200 kilograms heavier, and over its life course, nobody says how much more that is going to increase, the actual carbon and emissions footprint of the vehicle. But the bumper is from recycled plastic. You have a lot of that crap, and all the manufacturers do that. They do something that is, and it's all about, I think they choose what they do based on how easy it is to put like in a media title, or how easy it is to turn it into a phrase, and how repeatable it is. I mean, at the end of the day, what I already said is we're driven by interest, control, power, profit, all of these things. And a company's always, look at Volkswagen and look at the Dieselgate thing. I mean, it's a company, and I'm pretty sure others have done things like that. Maybe they just haven't been caught. And it's like a company that when you look at the media stuff they did, they published a million things of animations of trees and their car driving next to it and the tree grows and all of that. So you've seen all of it. But like behind the scenes, what they were paying their engineers and their resources to do was to find something, how to fool the emissions equipment. It's like, imagine that was clever. Like imagine putting a lot of that effort into actually doing something green. So I don't know, greenwashing. It's like it's explained in the word itself. It's like, and there's a lot of it, and I feel like there's more and more of it. And while cars, they are becoming, you can say, yes, they're more efficient, yes, they're cleaner, but most of these, it's another problem is, and here's a concrete example, that some of the green stuff they put in just to meet regulations is not sustainable. For example, as you probably know, in Eastern Europe, in Southeastern Europe, diesels extremely popular. Turbo diesels extremely popular, and we have the Euro 6 norm for diesels. And all of these cars that are Euro 6, they have to have your DPF, they have to have your diesel fluid injection thing in the exhaust. They have to have all of this emissions equipment, and that emissions equipment lasts one owner. It lasts the first owner 100,000, 150,000 kilometers, depending on how you drive, what kind of fuel, a million factors. But they have undeniably a limited lifespan. And of course, cars get sold. Like you're done with your car, you sell it to me, I'm the next owner. And I live in a Eastern European country. And when the time comes, this technology was made in a way that if you want to fix it, if you want to replace it, it's extremely expensive. Like a new DPF filter, depending on the car, the price ranges from like 1,000 euros to 5,000 euros. And imagine somebody bought a 10,000 euro car, and then you tell them the bill is 5,000 euros. And then a few months later, I'm sorry, we're having a crazy storm. I don't know if you can hear it. Like right.
No, I hear it. Oh.
Okay. And then you have the next month that there something fails. What do you call the diesel injection thing? That's another God knows how many euros. These cars also. I mean, you have really weird things where people think you can have something for free. It's like I want to make the car cleaner. I want to make the car more efficient. You cannot get there for free. You cannot do it for. There's gonna be a cost. For example, you want cars to operate to reduce fuel consumptions. You want the car to operate at very low RPM, right? You want the engine to be at very low RPM. The engine does not want to be at such a low RPM, minimal throttle. You would end up getting discomfort. It's going to work poorly. It's going to vibrate. It's going to lock the engine. A million bad things. So to prevent user discomfort while operating the engine at excessively low RPM, they made it's called a dual mass pendular flywheel, and you put that, and sure, that restores the user comfort with that horrible low RPM.
So that'll be the vibrations and stuff, right?
Yeah, but when it fails, it's 3,500, 4,000, 5,500 euros, depending on the car. And somebody has to pay all of that. And usually what the people who are the second owners, they cannot afford that. I mean, you have your economic situation. And if you tell somebody pay this and they need their car to go to work, so what they're going to do, they're just going to bypass the emissions equipment. And the problem is that without that emissions equipment, that car can pollute worse than a Euro 3 and older car, because you have a very high strung engine and you remove that emissions equipment from it. It's going to be a nightmare in terms of pollution. And then you have cities in Eastern Europe which are incredibly, the air is like Sarajevo. I spent most of my life in Sarajevo. We get hazardous air sometimes because there's a lot of people who just take a drill to a DPF filter and drill it. And the government, nobody talked about this. And this is your exporting of emissions. Germany, realistically, they exported bad emissions to Eastern Europe. They built emissions equipment, which is realistically not sustainable. And I'm saying you need to regulate this. I'm saying you need this emissions equipment. I'm all for it. But it also has to be reliable and sustainable and repairable. Otherwise, just make the whole damn car last, 150,000 kilometers and then recycle everything, which is what they often do nowadays. So, greenwashing, you cannot have anything there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's really true.
Yeah, you have to give something up to get something else. And
then you're not going to say what you gave up. And that's how you do it. You achieve an improvement. you do it like this. I'm not going to tell you how I do it. You're going to suffer 10 years later when this car fails. So, yeah.
This brings you to another question I wanted to, and it's a topic you also cover extensively on your channel. I think it's this thing where back in the communist days, where we had quite a few brands, but they're all, so the main brands were the Dacia 1100 and 1300, which were basically the Renault 8 and 12, if I'm not mistaken, produced under license in Romania. We have the 06, which is done with Citroën, and then we have all of course Trabant, the Moxpit. Please be
under license.
There is this thing where, especially with the Dacias, but I think the other cars as well, where if the car broke down in the middle of the road, people used to make fun of this. You could take a stocking and some rubber band and do whatever pump and just keep it. Or so this was on the fly, or repairs on the fly. But then you had those things where I remember my father had a Skoda, the 120L version, the one that's a bit fatty, very very nice car. And at some point they had to replace the whole cloth system. And he had some very he's good at engineering as well, but he had some colleagues at work that were way more experienced than him, and they took the entire engine out of the car, they took it apart, and probably you wouldn't see people doing this today, and these were even less experienced people were doing this. But today, if your car broke down, right, most people just call a service and just tow me away. Is this still doable today with the cars of today, where you just go inside and make a quick fix, just being as an average driver? Or try in the second part of the question, would you be able to prolong the life of your car by just performing repairs, performing replacements, just doing all this stuff, or you have cars that last you for 20 or 30 years?
Yeah. I mean, the deal is cars are harder to repair today. So there's no doubt about it. That's one of the prices you have to pay for a better car. If you compare today's car with a car from the past, it's better in absolutely every way. It handles better. It is more comfortable. It is faster. It is more enjoyable. It's a billion times safer. So, crash one of those old cars. I know people who died at like 40 kilometers per hour. So, we gained a lot. At the same time, cars can be repaired. I mean, I worked at a mechanics shop, and you can repair, even the newest cars, they can be repaired. The problem is that sometimes the repairs are really expensive. It takes more time. You have to remove more parts because you're packaging a lot more parts into a small space. So you have a million modules, a million systems, a million subs. It's a lot of things. You have to remove like 3 million wires and hoses and just to get to something, which is okay. I mean, that's a realistic price to pay to get what we got. So no doubt about it. Can you extend the life of a vehicle? Sure. Most cars, most engines can be rebuilt up to a certain point in the past. And nowadays, a lot of manufacturers are putting in like an engine block. It's an aluminum engine block. And the cylinder liner is so thin because it's applied using special technology. It's so thin that you can no longer rebuild a block.
Right.
A block rebuild is you bore it and you put in, slightly larger pistons, and you give the engine another life. Nowadays, you throw away the block. It's not doable, and the engine is, even in factory service manuals, it is designated as throwaway. However, people say it's a bad thing. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Most of these blocks, like aluminum engine blocks, they're beautifully recyclable. There is technology in there that recycles an engine really well, and most of the stuff on the engine can be recycled pretty well. So, and a rebuild in itself is also, I mean, I don't know. It is really tricky. Like, you can make a cast iron block, which is a bit heavier, so it is going to cost a bit more in emissions, but it is going to last longer. I mean, the problem we really run into eventually is data. We don't have the data. Nobody ever did research to tell you what is truly environmentally friendly. A block that lasts.
Environmental, we were being beat over the head about the environment every single day, and yet we still don't know these things. To me, yes, very strange.
Maybe I don't want to guarantee it. Maybe there's research somewhere. Maybe I haven't seen it, but I'm not personally familiar with research that anyone has ever done that where you actually test. That's a nice example. Cylinder block. what is better, like genuinely better for the environment. Tell me the actual cost of the recycling. But again, you can't really get data. It's also, we're entering into a field where it's impossible to get that data because you have a million different engine block designs. You have dozens of different alloys that different manufacturers use. Some of these alloys are protected by law. They're proprietary alloy. They don't have to tell you what's in it. Nobody's going to know. So, tough topics, man. Tough topics.
So, all right, just we'll probably have just a couple of more questions. So, a funny one. I was talking about it yesterday because I actually had a discussion with a friend about how safe are cars and how robust are cars today as opposed to cars, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago. And I remember that video of yours about a Volvo 240 and how resistant it really is. And just as a fun question, if you had like a Volvo 240 crashing at 80 kilometers per hour into the Dacia Duster, the 2024 version, which one do you think you'd get totaled, and which one do you think would be less safe?
Now, when it comes to this, like when it comes to car safety, it really isn't. You do not want a tank. Believe it or not, you do not want a incredibly rigid car.
Right.
Like if you have something that's incredibly strong, it's going to transfer. It's incredibly rigid. It's going to transfer all of the G's, the sudden changes to you, and you're going to die in it. Yeah. So I would probably choose the Dacia, believe it or not, Dacia. Do you say Dacia or Dacia?
I say Dacia. We say Dacia. In Romanian it's Dacia. Yes.
Yeah, to me it's Dacia. But other people say Dacia. Yeah, it sounds better. So I would probably choose the Dacia because number one, nowadays you have the advantage of all the computer simulations and they can simulate all the crumple zones, and you want the car to crumple beautifully to absorb all of that horrible impact. Yeah. So you're alive in it. The other reason is it's a bit taller, and here's your this is why the crossovers are creating a thing. I drive a normal car, you drive a crossover. I'm going to transition to the crossover because I also want to be at the same level as you.
So you don't slide under.
Yeah, so I don't end up under. That's not really how it really happens, but it's a.
This is the perception, at least.
It is justifiable, and there is some advantage of being slightly higher than the other guy, obviously. And this is why you make one crossover, everybody's gonna want a crossover, and we're all elevating ourselves really for no reason. So I think technology in terms of safety, the Volvo is an example of an old car that's really safe. It's pretty good for that time, but I think the modern cars, when it comes to safety, you have airbags, you have crumple zones, you have cleverness everywhere. When you go to the car and you rock it and you knock on the aluminum, it feels flimsy maybe for some new cars.
Yeah, it does.
They really have improved safety, and there have been it's like an example of really good science. All the testing, the crash tests, they crashed billions of them. They saved God knows how many lives. So zero complaints in that regards in terms of newer cars. The price is a bit more weight for the airbags and all of that crap, but at the same time they reduced the weight of many of the materials. We moved to a lot of aluminum, a lot of plastic, so we really can't be unfair. That was definitely a positive improvement.
Do you think people nowadays are inclined to be less prudent in their driving because they know the cars are designed to protect them? Is there it can be anecdotal. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a study. What do you think? What would be your
probably no
in this regard?
Probably no. I don't think people are more crazy. You had a driver, a crazy, overly, courageous. I'm going to say courageous is a nice word. Like overly courageous driver is going to be like that no matter what kind of car you give them. And we have still our human instincts. When you feel too much speed, too much craziness, it doesn't matter what kind of car you're in, you're going to be afraid. And if you're objective, and I know it's like, and you take somebody in the passenger seat and you drive, fast, they're not going to ask you how many airbags you have. They're just going to tell you, please, come on, slow down. You put people, like you can have the greatest race car driver in the driver's seat, and you put a normal person next to them and put them on an empty track, people are still going to scream. They're going to be afraid because it's our natural instinct. So I don't think changing whatever with the car makes people more inclined to be crazy. They will drive a bit faster nowadays.
because the car is, you cannot hear the engine, you cannot hear the wind noise that much, you cannot hear all of that.
It doesn't vibrate.
So a modern car at 100 kilometers per hour feels like an old car at like 60 kilometers per hour. You take a really old car, you drive that really fast, it feels 3 times as fast. But still, modern cars are safer, so it really...
You're right. So it just compensates.
Yeah, but I don't think people are driving worse or being crazier because, you know, the cars are, because they know they're more safer. At least I don't feel that.
Yeah. So, final question. We can see there is, so at least to me, because both myself and my colleague on these channels, we're both hailing from the audiovisual or kind of artsy environment. So it really bothers me, again, as a non-driver, as a non-car owner, that cars lost so much personality, even American cars. There are just a few brands that still maintain some of their personality, and I think Volkswagen is one of them, which they're still true to their heritage in some regard. But then all you get is basically cars that look like toy cars and cars that look like tanks. And there is a sense of not only changing aesthetic, because you can expect changes in aesthetic to happen, but a loss in appetite for aesthetic experiment and for weird shapes. Because back in the 60s, 50s, 70s, you'd see a lot of experimenting being done. Everywhere you see all kind of weird shapes and interesting designs. But that seems to me it's gone now. So am I right about this? And why do you think that is?
I think, when you look at some of these timeless designs, I don't know, always what comes to my mind first, not my favorite car, but it's a timeless design, Jaguar E-Type. It's like, but the reason why you could not make this car today is because it doesn't meet the safety standards. It's like you think of a nice example that I can think of is pop-up headlights. I love pop-up headlights. I grew up with it.
And I know they phased them out because you can hit the
passenger, not a passenger, like a pedestrian. You're gonna harm them, and that's okay. I think it's a justifiable reason to remove the pop-up headlights. It's okay if it saves one child from dying or ruining their brain or whatever. Screw it, remove it. There are levels of importance. My personal enjoyment of pop-up headlights should be sacrificed, for that. At least that's the way I see it. But that's what there again. The whole, I think, if we want to put a theme on our conversation, is you cannot get something without sacrificing something. It's like impossible. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So what we're getting is a more unified look of cars, because they have to, the bonnet has to have a certain, the engine oil has to have a certain curve in it, again, to absorb a pedestrian, to help absorb it, makes the car more bulbous, more, uglier. You have to have this, you have to have that, and all of that starting dictating. For example, the A pillar of the car, when you're driving, the pillar that's right here, it became so much thicker in the last, I don't know how many years, 20 years, let's say, because you have to stuff an airbag in there. And you have to make it thicker, and that's good. They're a lot safer now. They're much stronger. If you flip around, you're going to survive probably in a modern car. But the price is you're losing visibility because it's so thick here. Sometimes you just don't see when you're making a 90-degree turn. You can hit a dog or something. Always there. It's always everything's a compromise. Cars, are they becoming uglier because of that? Probably yes. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Most of the time, when you look at the top 10 most beautiful cars, ever made, which there's consensus between designers, and there's very few, modern-ish cars on that list. Not saying there are no nice new cars. There definitely are.
There are nice cars, but nothing so
crazy and experimental and funky. You get that, but it's like at really high price levels, and it's usually brand. They make just a few of them, so it's tricky. I don't know. You can't get something. It is. We are losing that. That is true. And another problem there is companies ruin that without needing to ruin it. Something that can be done to help it. Many companies insist on all of their cars having the same face. This
I've seen
the visual identity of the brand.
Very
and
like this.
Or just take Volkswagen. Look at a Golf. Look at a Touran. Look at the Touareg, the Tiguan, the Two. I don't even know what they have anymore. There's like a million crossovers. They all have the same face because they have to have the corporate identity, the visual identity of Volkswagen. Take Opel, take Corolla, take Toyota, take whoever, Honda, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right. The logo is not enough anymore just to have the logo or the
And I think, and I understand it from a marketing perspective, but I think honestly, it's unnecessary. If you look at brands back in the 80s, every car, like Toyota, look at the Celica, Corolla, the MR2, every car was an identity of its own. It even had different badges. Back then, Toyota had like the MR2 has like a little, like an eagle. The Supra had like some sort of little dragon badge. It was fun. It was childish, but it was fun. You know, it was experimental. It was different. So I think that it might come back. Who knows? But I think this sort of every car from this brand looks the same is honestly, in my opinion, unnecessary. I can read a badge, as you say.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned marketing, because this is one of the things we've observed in other, because we hear on, at least on this particular channel, we started looking at is culture and technology through the age of politics and getting kind of a philosophical angle. And something that I observed as well, again, hailing from the creative industry, is that right now we reached a point where the whole business has to follow marketing, not the other way around. Where marketing says you have to design things this way, or you have to make a video or a movie or a game this way, where things should be the other way around. Look, I'm doing the game, I'm creating a car, I'm creating whatever product. You, the marketing guys, are supposed to find a way to market that. I'm not supposed to adapt myself to whatever you want to sell. So obviously, you'll have to be aware of what the market requires and what goes. But on the other hand, there were situations when people innovated on the market, and I'm gonna come up with something new, and I'm gonna change the trend. Right now, it seems, all companies are so risk averse. You look even at movies. It's no more new ideas. Why? Because studios won't risk creating new ideas for fear of losing market share. And I think this applies in certain degrees to any industry, like you noted, including the car industry. It's just, and it's a sad thing, because I'm all for profit. I think people are driven by self-interest, and I think as long as that self-interest doesn't hurt anyone else, it's a good way to go. But on the other hand, it's this thing where we just don't take any risk at all for fear of losing some market share. It's a sorry state that we're in. I hope it will change. I hope to see again some because at the level the science we have right now, nobody can convince me that we can't do nice looking cars and have them safe. So again, with the level of knowledge we have today,
but you can't have them be cheap. But you can't have them.
Obviously, there's always this. It's with me, because, like I told you, I do video editing. This is my main thing that I'm doing, where I'm earning my bread, so to speak. I'm very focused on high-end video editing, and then I always tell my clients the same thing. Look, you can have it. There's fast, cheap, and good. Again, pick two of those. There's no way I can deliver or give you all those 3 points. So again, it's about knowing how and where to compromise.
But I totally agree with you on the marketing thing. Totally agree on that. I think products or everything, it should be a consequence of passion, skill, expertise, whatever. It should be a consequence of work, and not, you see that on YouTube as well. You see a lot of channels who just imitate something. They think that's the good thing, and that person could probably do a lot better if they just did their own thing. And you see people imitate a trend. They just do this because they think that's what's going to make the money.
I had clients come to me and tell me, look, I want you to edit me a video like Mr. Beast. And look, that's done already. And I told them, like, this was like 2 years ago, I think. And what happens this year is that we see people getting fed up with that kind of style. So
everything is a fad. Everything comes and goes, everything. But when you think about music. Like some of the greatest music we consider, ever is from the 60s, right? And it's an era of like massive experimentation. People who got the biggest records, and studio contracts were considered the lunatics like a couple of years ago, crazy guys experimenting with in their garage, doing whatever together with some whatever kind of substances, but it doesn't really matter. They made incredible music because the music wasn't a consequence of them imagining, oh, I want to be a superstar. They didn't give a crap. They wanted to make like, later, of course, you got that trend. Everybody wanted to be a rock star. But some of the greatest ones were they just loved the music and they wanted to make the music. And, there wasn't somebody coming, and ghost editing their lyrics, oh, you shouldn't say that. That doesn't
the entire music shit.
Because you were too high when you wrote this, So, and then you should say whatever stupid crap, but then you see this trend today where the managers are creating the stars. They find somebody, they look the way, you know the drill. I don't even have to explain.
It's so common, and it's and that's why I find this type of discussions fascinating, because we're not we are generally talking about cars here, but what we talk here can be applied to understand other things in that there, and this is that's why I always enjoy our this type of conversation. That's why I enjoyed. I really loved it when you started talking about that. Governments starting to act like churches, because I already had that set up, and I didn't have to set it up for you. You were already thinking about that, and I think we can have patterns of analysis that when we can apply to different situations and see, compare notes, how things work in certain industry, how people react, how people consume things, how their morals adapt, and come up with solutions that are, useful for everyone else, not just people that are in this video interested just in cars. No, look, we're talking cars, but this is not something it's isolated. It's something that applies to, or can apply to a number of other things. So this I'm really, 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 really glad the conversation went this way, and I actually hope we will repeat this conversation, because I feel we just barely scratched the surface, and it's fascinating, and again I invite everyone to just visit your channel. I'm gonna add the links in although I'm like minuscule, I have like a minuscule channel compared to yours, but if you don't know the Drive for Answers channel, just go watch it. You'll have a blast. It's just it's both informative and fun, really well done. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to come along, and I really hope we're gonna have this conversation or a similar conversation soon.
Sure, I had a great time as well. It was a really nice chat. Thank you so much.
Great, nice to hear that. So I'm really glad to have you on. See you next time.
Thanks for inviting. Ciao.